My daughter-in-law smiled as she handed me the papers that would supposedly transfer my company to them, calling me too senile to manage anything anymore. I signed without reading a word, watching their faces light up with greed. What they inherited instead was a financial nightmare that would destroy them both. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. Let me take you back to that dinner from hell. I'm Eleanor Matthews, 68 years old, and apparently, according to my own family, losing my mind. My son Marcus and his wife Sarah had invited me over for what I thought was a simple Sunday dinner. Instead, I walked into an ambush. "Mom, we need to talk," Marcus said, barely letting me sit down. Sarah was already pulling out a manila folder, her perfectly manicured nails drumming against the mahogany table. "It's about the business." Matthews and Associates had been my life's work. After my husband died 15 years ago, I'd built it from a small consulting firm into a multi-million-dollar operation, but according to my loving family, I was now too old and confused to handle it. "These are transfer documents," Sarah explained, her voice dripping with fake concern. "Dr. Peterson agrees that the stress of running a company at your age isn't healthy." She'd somehow gotten my doctor to provide a letter recommending I step back from business activities. Funny how she'd managed that, without me being present for the conversation. Marcus shifted uncomfortably. "It's for your own good, Mom. You've been forgetting things, missing appointments." This was news to me. I'd missed exactly one appointment in 6 months because of a client emergency, but apparently that was evidence of mental decline. "The paperwork transfers full ownership to us," Sarah continued. "We'll handle everything so you can just relax and enjoy your retirement." The way she said "enjoy your retirement" made it sound like a threat. I picked up the pen they'd placed in front of me. "And if I don't sign?" Sarah's mask slipped for just a moment. "Well, we'd hate to have to pursue a competency hearing. These things can get so messy, and the courts are always looking out for elderly people who might be taken advantage of." The irony wasn't lost on me. I was being threatened with a competency hearing by the very people trying to steal my company. Marcus wouldn't meet my eyes. My own son, who I'd put through law school, who'd failed the bar exam twice before I paid for his 3rd attempt, was sitting there letting his wife threaten me. "Of course," Sarah added sweetly, "you'll still live in the house. We'd never kick you out. You just won't have to worry about all those complicated business decisions anymore." I signed every document they put in front of me. Sarah actually clapped her hands together like a child on Christmas morning. Marcus finally looked at me, probably expecting tears or protests. Instead, he found me smiling. "Congratulations," I said, standing up and smoothing my skirt. "You're now the proud owners of Matthews and Associates. I hope you're ready for everything that comes with it." Something in my tone made Sarah's smile falter. "What do you mean?" "Oh, nothing important," I said, gathering my purse. "Just the usual business obligations. I'm sure you've done your research." I headed toward the door. "Thank you for dinner. And Sarah, you might want to check your email in the morning. The IRS has some questions about the company's tax structure. Something about a $3 million discrepancy." The color drained from both their faces as I walked out, leaving them with their precious paperwork and a company that was about to become their worst nightmare. "Mom, what the hell did you do?" Marcus's voice crackled through my phone at 6:47 a.m. Exactly 12 hours after he'd become the proud owner of a company drowning in legal problems. I sipped my coffee slowly, watching the sunrise paint my garden in shades of gold. "Good morning to you too, dear. I assume you've been reading your emails." The IRS wants to audit everything back to 2019. "And there's something about pending litigation from Patterson Industries." His voice rose to a pitch I hadn't heard since he was 16 and crashed my car. "Oh yes, Patterson Industries. Lovely people. They're suing for breach of contract. Something about a $2.7 million project that went sideways." I paused for effect. "Of course, that's all documented in the files you inherited. I'm sure Sarah will figure it out." The truth was, I'd been dealing with these problems for months. The IRS audit was legitimate. My accountant had made some aggressive deductions that needed clarification. The Patterson lawsuit was frivolous. They were trying to blame us for their own poor planning. But resolving both required expertise, relationships, and about 6 months of intensive legal work. "You can't just dump this on us," Marcus sputtered. "We don't know how to handle this stuff." "That's odd," I replied calmly. Yesterday you seemed so confident about taking over. Sarah was particularly eloquent about how I was too senile to manage my own affairs. This is different. And you know it. Different indeed. When they'd wanted my company, they'd painted me as a confused old woman. Now that they had it, suddenly they needed my expertise. The contradiction would have been amusing if it wasn't my own son on the other end of the line. I'm sure you'll figure it out, I said. After all, you did say yesterday that running a business was too complicated for someone my age. Surely two sharp young professionals like yourselves can handle a few legal issues. Sarah's voice came through the background, clearly frantic. Marcus covered the phone, but I could still hear her. Ask her what we're supposed to do. We can't afford lawyers for all this. That was the delicious irony. They'd stolen a profitable company, but they'd also inherited its problems. And solving those problems would cost far more than the company was currently worth. Marcus, I said gently, you and Sarah wanted this responsibility. You made it very clear that I was incompetent to handle my own affairs. So handle them. Mom, please. We need help. You need help, I agreed. But according to the documents I signed yesterday, I'm just a senile old woman with no business expertise. Why would you want help from someone like that? I could hear Sarah in the background again, her voice shrill. Tell her we'll give the company back. I laughed softly. Oh, that's not how this works. You see, the transfer documents you had me sign, they're ironclad. Sarah was very thorough about that. And according to those same documents, I've been declared mentally incompetent to make business decisions. So legally, I can't take the company back even if I wanted to. The silence on the other end was deafening. But don't worry, I continued. I'm sure everything will work out fine. After all, what's the worst that could happen when the IRS finds irregularities during an audit of a company whose new owners have no experience in tax law? Marcus made a choking sound. I have to go, I said cheerfully. I'm having lunch with my neighbor Dorothy. She's been so worried about my mental state since you told everyone I was becoming senile. I should probably reassure her that I'm just fine. I hung up and immediately called my attorney. Robert, it's Eleanor. They took the bait. How long until the real fun begins? The certified letter arrived on Tuesday, exactly 3 days after Marcus and Sarah had become the proud owners of my former company. I was deadheading roses in my garden when the postal worker knocked, clipboard in hand. Eleanor Matthews, need your signature for this one. I signed with dirty hands, leaving soil smudges on the receipt. The return address made me smile. Patterson Industries law firm, right on schedule. Inside the house, I opened the letter slowly, savoring each word. Patterson Industries was demanding immediate payment of $2.7 million for breach of contract, plus interest and legal fees. The letter gave Matthews and Associates 30 days to respond or face immediate collection proceedings. My phone rang before I'd finished reading. Mom! Marcus's voice was barely controlled panic. Did you know about this lawsuit? Which lawsuit, dear? You'll need to be more specific. There are several pending. I wasn't lying. I'd been managing multiple legal issues for months, but most were minor disputes that would settle quietly. This one was different. This one had teeth. Patterson Industries. They say we owe them almost $3 million. Oh, that. I walked to my kitchen window, still holding the letter. Yes, that's been going on for about 8 months now. Nasty business. They're claiming we failed to deliver on a consulting contract. Did we? The question hung in the air. This was the moment I'd been waiting for, when my son would finally understand that running a business involved more than just cashing checks. That's complicated, I said. We delivered exactly what the contract specified, but Patterson's executives didn't like the results, so they're claiming the work was inadequate. It's a common tactic. Hire consultants, ignore their advice, then sue when your own decisions fail. So we'll win the case? Eventually. Probably. But defending a lawsuit costs money, Marcus. Lots of money. The legal fees alone will run about $400,000 even if we win. And that's assuming Patterson doesn't drag this out for years. I could hear Sarah in the background, her voice rising to a shriek. $400,000! How much cash does the company have? Marcus asked, and I could hear the calculator clicking in his mind. Well, that's another issue, I said carefully. The company's liquid assets are somewhat tied up right now. What do you mean, tied up? Operating capital, dear. The money that keeps the business running day to day. Payroll, rent, Insurance, client expenses. Most successful companies operate with very little cash on hand. It's more efficient to keep money working in investments. This wasn't entirely true. I'd been quietly moving liquid assets into protected accounts for months, preparing for exactly this scenario. But Marcus and Sarah didn't need to know that yet. How much do we have available for legal fees? Marcus's voice was strained. About 60,000 in the checking account, maybe another 40 in short-term accounts. Dead silence. That's not enough. Sarah's voice came through clearly now. She'd obviously grabbed the phone from Marcus. You knew about this lawsuit when you signed those papers. You deliberately didn't tell us. Sarah, dear, you and Marcus made it very clear that I was too mentally impaired to discuss complex business matters. How could I possibly explain ongoing litigation to people who'd already determined I was senile? This is fraud. We can sue you for fraud. I laughed softly. With what money, dear? You now own a company facing a $3 million lawsuit with only $100,000 in available cash. I don't think you'll be hiring any lawyers anytime soon. The beautiful truth was finally sinking in. They'd been so focused on grabbing my profitable company that they'd never considered its liabilities. Like amateur fishermen who'd caught a shark, they were about to discover that some prizes come with very sharp teeth. Besides, I added, the transfer documents you had me sign included a clause stating that I disclosed all known liabilities. It's right there in paragraph 7, subsection C. I'm sure you read it carefully before having me sign. Of course, that paragraph listed dozens of potential liabilities in dense legal language. Patterson Industries was mentioned by name, along with the approximate dollar amount. Any competent lawyer would have caught it and demanded details. But Sarah had been in such a hurry to steal my company that she'd skipped the due diligence entirely. We need help, Marcus said finally. We can't handle this alone. I'm sure you'll figure something out, I replied. After all, yesterday you told everyone I was too senile to run my own company. Why would you want advice from someone like that? The second shoe dropped on Friday morning when Sarah called, sobbing so hard I could barely understand her. The bank froze our credit line, she managed between gasps. They want the Patterson lawsuit resolved before they'll extend any more funds. I set down my coffee and settled into my favorite chair. This was better than cable television. That's unfortunate, I said mildly. Though I suppose it makes sense from their perspective. Banks don't like lending money to companies facing major litigation. You knew this would happen, Sarah accused. You set us up. I set you up? I laughed genuinely now. Sarah, you threatened me with a competency hearing unless I signed papers transferring my company to you. I was apparently too senile to run my own business, remember? How could someone that mentally impaired possibly set up anyone? The irony was perfect. Either I was competent enough to have orchestrated their downfall, in which case their theft was even more despicable, or I was the senile old woman they'd claimed, in which case they'd been outmaneuvered by someone with dementia. We can't make payroll next week, Sarah continued. 12 employees, Eleanor. 12 people will lose their jobs because of what you did. That stung a little. I'd built Matthews and Associates from nothing, and those employees had been loyal. But I'd also been planning for this moment much longer than Sarah realized. Actually, I said, I have a solution for the employees. What do you mean? I'm starting a new consulting firm, EM Advisors. 7 of your employees have already accepted positions with me, starting Monday. Silence. The other 5 have found positions with my competitors. I made some calls yesterday, pulled in a few favors. Everyone will be working by Monday, probably making more money than you were paying them. You can't do that, Sarah shrieked. That's poaching. It's illegal. Actually, it's not. I checked with my attorney. Since I no longer own Matthews and Associates, I'm free to start a competing business. And since your company can't make payroll, the employees are free to seek other employment. The truth was even sweeter than Sarah knew. I'd been planning this move for months, carefully documenting every client relationship, every process, every advantage that had made Matthews and Associates successful. The new company would have all the expertise and relationships, while Matthews and Associates would be left with nothing but debt and litigation. Besides, I continued, I thought you'd appreciate me taking those pesky employees off your hands. After all, if you can't afford to pay them, they're really more of a liability than an asset. The clients will follow them, Marcus's voice came through. Apparently he'd taken the phone back. "You're stealing our clients." "Your clients?" I asked sweetly. "Marcus, dear, most of those clients have been working with me personally for over a decade. They have no relationship with Matthews and Associates. They have a relationship with me. And since you've publicly declared me mentally incompetent, I doubt they'll want to continue working with a company run by people who inherited their business from someone they claim is senile." This was the final piece of my plan falling into place. Sarah and Marcus would be left with a company name, some office furniture, and crushing debt. Meanwhile, I'd have the clients, the employees, and none of the liabilities. "You can't leave us with nothing," Marcus pleaded, and for a moment he sounded like the little boy who used to climb into my lap when he was scared. "I didn't leave you with nothing," I corrected gently. "I left you with exactly what you asked for, my company. The fact that you didn't bother to understand what you were taking is your responsibility, not mine." "Mom, please. Sarah made me do this. I never wanted to take the company away from you." That might have been true, but it was too late for excuses now. "Marcus, for the past year, you've watched your wife insult me, threaten me, and undermine me at every family gathering. You never once stood up for me or told her to stop. When she decided to steal my company, you went along with it. When she threatened me with a competency hearing, you said nothing." My voice hardened. "You made your choice. Now you get to live with the consequences. What are we supposed to do?" "I suggest you start by finding a good bankruptcy attorney," I said. "You're going to need one." I hung up and immediately called Robert Patterson, CEO of Patterson Industries. "Robert? It's Eleanor. How are Margaret and the kids?" "Good, good. Listen, I wanted to talk to you about that little lawsuit your lawyers filed. I think we can work something out." The meeting was set for Monday morning at Patterson Industries headquarters. I arrived 15 minutes early, wearing my best navy suit and carrying a leather briefcase that had belonged to my husband. Robert Patterson met me in the lobby personally, which told me everything I needed to know about how seriously he was taking this conversation. "Eleanor, you look wonderful," he said, his smile genuine but cautious. "I have to admit, I was surprised when you called." "I imagined so," I replied, shaking his hand firmly. "Shall we get to business?" His conference room overlooked downtown, with windows that made everything seem possible. Robert's legal team was already assembled, 3 attorneys in expensive suits who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. "Before we begin," Robert said, "I want you to know this lawsuit isn't personal. It's just business." I smiled. "Of course it is, and so is my response." I opened my briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. "I'd like to start by reviewing the original contract between Patterson Industries and Matthews and Associates." One of the lawyers, a sharp-faced woman in her 40s, leaned forward. "Mrs. Matthews, our position is clear. Your company failed to deliver the consulting services specified in the contract." "That's interesting," I said, pulling out the first document, "because according to this email from your project manager, dated 6 months ago, he specifically stated that our recommendations were exactly what Patterson Industries needed to streamline operations." I slid the email across the table. Robert read it quickly, his expression darkening. "Furthermore," I continued, "this document shows that Patterson Industries implemented exactly 0 of our recommendations. Not a single one. You paid for expert advice, ignored it completely, then blamed us when your own decisions led to project failure." The second lawyer, a young man who looked fresh out of law school, spoke up. "The contract required results, not just recommendations." "Actually, no." I pulled out the contract itself, highlighting specific sections. "The contract required comprehensive analysis and strategic recommendations for operational improvement, which we delivered, in writing, on time, with detailed implementation guidelines." I could see Robert's lawyers exchanging glances. They were realizing their case wasn't as strong as they'd thought. "However," I continued, "I'm not here to relitigate the past. I'm here to offer a solution." "What kind of solution?" Robert asked. "You drop the lawsuit against Matthews and Associates completely. In exchange, my new company, EM Advisors, will provide Patterson Industries with 6 months of free consulting to help implement the recommendations you ignored the first time." The sharp-faced lawyer opened her mouth to object, but Robert held up his hand. "That's generous," he said carefully. "But why would you help us after we sued you?" I smiled. Because the lawsuit isn't really about money, is it, Robert? Patterson Industries needs to show your board of directors that the failed project wasn't your fault. You need someone to blame. Robert's face confirmed my suspicion. The problem is, I continued, Matthews and Associates is now owned by my son and daughter-in-law, who have no experience in consulting. If you win this lawsuit, you'll get a judgment against a company that will be bankrupt within 6 months. You'll recover nothing, and you'll still have the same operational problems that caused the original project to fail. I leaned forward. But if you accept my offer, you get professional consulting services that will actually solve your problems. Your board will see results instead of lawsuits. And you'll be working with someone who has a track record of success instead of 2 amateurs who inherited a business they don't understand. The young lawyer tried again. Mrs. Matthews, this sets a precedent. The precedent, I interrupted, is that Patterson Industries is smart enough to choose solutions over revenge, that you care more about fixing problems than assigning blame. Robert was studying me carefully. What happens to your son and daughter-in-law? That's not your concern, I said simply. They made their bed when they decided to steal my company. Let them lie in it. The truth was, without the Patterson lawsuit, Matthews and Associates would still face bankruptcy within months. The company had no clients, no experienced employees, and mounting operational costs that Marcus and Sarah couldn't manage. But that wasn't Robert's problem to solve. I need to discuss this with my team, Robert said. Of course, but I should mention that this offer expires Friday. After that, you can continue with your lawsuit against a company that will be worthless by Christmas, or you can work with a consultant who can actually help you succeed. I stood up and closed my briefcase. Think about it, Robert. What's more valuable to Patterson Industries? $3 million you'll never collect, or 6 months of expert consulting that could save you 10 times that amount? As I walked to the elevator, I could hear heated discussion erupting in the conference room behind me. By Friday, they'd realize I was offering them the better deal, and Marcus and Sarah would be left with exactly what they deserved. Nothing. The call came at 4:47 p.m. on Friday, just hours before my deadline to Robert Patterson would expire. I was in my new office, a bright corner suite with windows overlooking the river, watching my former employees arrange their desks in our new space. Eleanor, it's Robert. We accept your offer. I smiled, making notes on my legal pad. Excellent. I'll have my attorney prepare the documentation. The lawsuit against Matthews and Associates will be withdrawn by Monday? Monday morning. Monday. And Eleanor? I owe you an apology. We should have listened to your recommendations the first time. Water under the bridge, Robert. I'm looking forward to working together again. After I hung up, I sat back in my chair and surveyed my kingdom. 7 experienced consultants, already working on projects I'd brought from my previous contacts. A client roster that was growing daily as word spread that Eleanor Matthews was back in business. And most importantly, a company that was entirely mine, free from family drama and legal entanglements. My assistant knocked on the door frame. Mrs. Matthews, your son is here. He's asking to see you. Marcus stood in my doorway looking like he'd aged 5 years in the past week. His usually perfect hair was disheveled, his shirt wrinkled. Dark circles under his eyes told the story of sleepless nights. Hello, Marcus, I said calmly. Please, sit down. He collapsed into the chair across from my desk. Mom, we need to talk. I'm listening. Patterson Industries dropped the lawsuit, he said. But they're working with your new company instead. Yes, I know. I negotiated that deal myself. Marcus stared at me. You planned all of this, didn't you? From the beginning. I considered lying, maintaining the fiction that I was just a confused old woman who'd stumbled into success. But Marcus deserved the truth, even if it destroyed him. Yes, I said simply. I planned every detail. How long? About a year, since Sarah first suggested I was getting too old to run my own company. Marcus put his head in his hands. We lost everything. The company's bankrupt. We can't make rent on the office. Sarah's talking about divorce. I felt a flicker of sympathy for the little boy who used to bring me drawings from school. But that little boy had grown into a man who'd helped his wife steal from his own mother. Marcus, for 12 months, you and Sarah treated me like I was losing my mind. You questioned my decisions, undermined my authority, and made me feel like a burden. When I asked for your support, you gave me lectures about accepting help. When I needed you to stand up for me, You stood by and watched your wife tear me down. My voice remained steady, professional. Did you really think there would be no consequences? I never wanted to take the company from you, he said quietly. Sarah convinced me it was for your own good. And what do you think now? Marcus looked around my new office, taking in the busy workplace I'd created in less than a week. I think you're the smartest person I know, and I'm the biggest fool who ever lived. That admission should have felt like victory. Instead, it just made me tired. The company transfers are legal and binding, I said. Matthews and Associates belongs to you and Sarah. What you do with it is your decision. There's nothing left to do. We're filing for bankruptcy next week. I opened my desk drawer and pulled out an envelope. Actually, there is one option. Marcus looked up hopefully. My new company needs someone to handle our legal compliance and contract negotiations. It's not glamorous work, and it pays about half what you were making before. But it's honest work for an honest wage. I slid the envelope across my desk. That's a job offer, Marcus. Not a gift, not charity. You'd be an employee, nothing more. You'd report to my operations manager, follow company policies, and earn your position every single day. Marcus opened the envelope with shaking hands. What about Sarah? What about her? Would there be a position for her too? I studied my son's face. After everything that had happened, he was still trying to protect the woman who'd orchestrated his downfall. Sarah made her choices, I said. She decided I was senile and incompetent. She threatened me with a competency hearing. She stole my company and tried to humiliate me in the process. I paused. People like that don't work for me. Marcus nodded slowly. I understand. Do you? Because accepting this job means admitting that your mother wasn't senile after all. It means acknowledging that you were wrong and that your wife manipulated you into betraying your own family. I know. And it means that if you ever again let anyone treat me the way Sarah did, you'll be out on the street permanently. No second chances, no family forgiveness, nothing. Marcus met my eyes for the first time since he'd entered my office. I understand, Mom, and I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I looked at my son, really looked at him, and saw something I hadn't seen in years. Humility, regret, and maybe, just maybe, a glimmer of the boy who used to think his mother could fix anything. Think about the offer over the weekend, I said. Let me know Monday morning. As Marcus left my office, I turned back to my window overlooking the river. In the reflection, I saw a woman who looked exactly like the Eleanor Matthews who'd signed those transfer papers a week ago. But inside, everything had changed. I'd gotten my revenge. My son and daughter-in-law had lost everything, just as I'd planned. But looking at Marcus's broken expression, I wondered if some victories cost more than they were worth. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. This isn't over. I'll find a way to destroy you for what you've done. I deleted the message without responding. Some people never learned. But maybe Marcus would be different. Maybe losing everything would teach him what I'd tried to show him all along. That family isn't about what you can take from each other. It's about what you're willing to give. Monday morning would tell me whether my son had finally learned that lesson or if he was truly lost forever. Marcus accepted the job offer, but Sarah's revenge was just beginning. On Tuesday morning, I arrived at my office to find 2 police officers waiting in the lobby with handcuffs. Eleanor Matthews, you're under arrest for elder abuse and financial fraud. I remained calm as they read me my rights, though inside I was calculating furiously. Sarah had moved faster than I'd anticipated, and apparently she'd found someone willing to listen to her version of events. My attorney is Robert Chen, I told the officers. I'd like to call him immediately. At the police station, I learned the scope of Sarah's accusations. According to her sworn statement, I had manipulated my own son into stealing my company, then used my knowledge of the business to sabotage his efforts. She claimed I was suffering from early-stage dementia that made me paranoid and vindictive. The most damaging allegation was that I'd hidden assets from the company transfer, effectively defrauding Marcus and Sarah of money that rightfully belonged to them. Robert Chen arrived within an hour, his expression grim. Eleanor, this is serious. Sarah has bank records showing large transfers from Matthews and Associates accounts to your personal accounts over the past 6 months. Those transfers were perfectly legal, I said. I was the sole owner of the company. I had every right to manage its assets as I saw fit. The problem is timing, Robert explained. "If the prosecution can prove you knew Marcus and Sarah intended to take over the company, and you deliberately moved assets to prevent them from accessing the money, that could constitute fraud." I almost laughed at the irony. Sarah was accusing me of the very crime she'd been planning to commit, stealing money that didn't belong to her. "What kind of evidence do they have?" "Email records showing you discussing business plans with your accountant 3 days before the transfer. Phone records showing calls to your bank. And Marcus is on record saying you seemed unusually cooperative about signing the papers." Marcus had provided evidence against me. My own son, who I just offered a job to rebuild his life, had helped his wife try to destroy mine. "Where's Marcus now?" I asked. "That's another problem," Robert said carefully. "He and Sarah have disappeared. They cleared out their apartment yesterday and haven't been seen since." The picture was becoming clearer. Sarah had filed criminal charges against me, then fled before anyone could question her story too closely. It was actually quite clever. By disappearing, she'd made it impossible for me to confront her lies while ensuring the legal process would move forward without her presence. What happens next? Arraignment tomorrow morning. They'll set bail, assuming the judge grants it. After that, we prepare for trial. That night, sitting in a holding cell that smelled of disinfectant and desperation, I had time to think. Sarah had outmaneuvered me, at least temporarily, but she'd also made a critical mistake. She'd assumed I was playing by the rules. I wasn't. The next morning, Judge Patricia Williams presided over my arraignment. She was a stern-looking woman in her 60s who'd built her reputation on being tough but fair. "Mrs. Matthews, you're charged with elder abuse in the first degree and financial fraud. How do you plead?" "Not guilty, Your Honor." "Bail is set at $50,000. Trial is scheduled for—" "Your Honor," I interrupted. "I'd like to make a statement." Judge Williams frowned. "Mrs. Matthews, I strongly advise you to consult with your attorney before—" "I understand the risks, Your Honor, but there's something the court needs to know about the complainant's credibility." Robert Chen was making frantic gestures for me to stop talking, but I continued. "Sarah Matthews, who filed these charges, is currently a fugitive. She and my son disappeared yesterday, immediately after filing this complaint. I believe they're attempting to flee the country with money they embezzled from Matthews and Associates." The prosecutor, a young woman who'd been looking confident, suddenly appeared worried. "Furthermore," I continued, "I have evidence that Sarah Matthews has been planning this fraud for over a year, and that the company transfer she claims was legitimate was actually accomplished through threats and coercion." Judge Williams looked intrigued despite herself. "What kind of evidence?" "Mrs. Matthews?" I smiled. "Audio recordings, Your Honor, of every conversation I had with my son and daughter-in-law over the past 6 months." The courtroom erupted in murmurs. The prosecutor was now looking actively panicked. "I've been recording our family interactions since Sarah first suggested I was becoming senile," I continued, "including the dinner where she threatened me with a competency hearing unless I signed the transfer documents." Robert Chen had stopped trying to shut me up and was now smiling himself. "Your Honor," I said, "I'd like to request that all charges be dropped and that a warrant be issued for the arrest of Sarah and Marcus Matthews for fraud, extortion, and filing false police reports." The audio recordings changed everything. Within hours of my arraignment, detectives were listening to Sarah's voice, threatening me with a competency hearing unless I signed the transfer papers. They heard Marcus agreeing to the plan despite clearly knowing it was wrong. Most damaging was the conversation from the week before the dinner when Sarah and Marcus discussed their strategy for taking my company. "We need to make her seem confused and incompetent," Sarah's voice was crystal clear on the recording. "Get her doctor to write a letter about cognitive decline. Make her feel like she's a burden." "What if she refuses to sign?" Marcus asked. "Then we file for guardianship. Once I'm her legal guardian, I can do whatever I want with her assets." The recordings proved that everything I'd told the police was true, and everything Sarah had claimed was a lie. By Thursday afternoon, warrants had been issued for both Marcus and Sarah's arrest, but they'd had a 3-day head start, and tracking them down wouldn't be easy. "The good news," Detective Morrison told me, "is that we froze all their bank accounts before they could access much money. The bad news is they're probably already out of the country." I wasn't so sure about that. Sarah was smart, but she was also arrogant. She wouldn't have fled without trying to salvage something from her failed plan. "Detective, Have you checked their storage unit? Morrison looked puzzled. What storage unit? Sarah rented a storage unit 6 months ago. She told Marcus it was for seasonal decorations, but I think she was preparing for this eventuality. Within 2 hours, police had located the unit. Inside, they found boxes of documents that had been stolen from Matthews and Associates, including client files, financial records, and contracts. They also found 3 suitcases full of cash, approximately $40,000 that had been embezzled from the company accounts. But Sarah and Marcus weren't there. That evening, my phone rang. The caller ID showed Marcus's number. "Hello, son." "Mom." His voice was strained, exhausted. "We saw the news. Sarah says we need to keep running. Where are you?" "I can't tell you that, but Mom, I want you to know, I never wanted it to go this far. Sarah said we'd just take the company and run it better than you could. She said you'd be happier not having to worry about business anymore." I closed my eyes. Even now, after everything that had happened, Marcus was still making excuses for his wife. "Marcus, you have 2 choices. You can keep running with Sarah and spend the rest of your life as a fugitive, or you can come home and face the consequences of what you've done. Sarah will never agree to come back." "I'm not talking about Sarah. I'm talking about you." A long pause. In the background, I could hear Sarah's voice, sharp and angry, though I couldn't make out the words. She's saying we should disappear completely. New identities, new life somewhere far away from here. "And what do you want to do?" Another pause, longer this time. "I want to come home, Mom. I want to fix this somehow." "Then do it. I can't leave Sarah. She's my wife." "Sarah destroyed your life, Marcus. She manipulated you into betraying your own mother, convinced you to commit multiple felonies, and now she's asking you to abandon everything you've ever known to live as a criminal." I could hear their argument escalating in the background. "She's all I have left," Marcus said quietly. "No," I replied. "You have me. You'll always have me, if you're willing to come home and make this right." The line went dead. Friday morning, Detective Morrison called with an update. We traced their credit cards to a hotel in Montreal. Canadian authorities are coordinating with us, but by the time officers arrived, they were gone again. "Any idea where they're headed?" "Sarah has a cousin in Switzerland. We're working with Interpol. But honestly, if they make it to Europe, it'll be much harder to bring them back." I hung up and stared out my office window. Somewhere out there, my son was running from the police with a woman who'd destroyed everything he'd ever cared about. Part of me wondered if I should have handled things differently, found a way to separate Marcus from Sarah's influence without destroying his life completely. But then I remembered the recordings. Marcus's voice agreeing to steal my company, his willingness to have me declared incompetent, his complete failure to protect me from Sarah's abuse. Some lessons could only be learned the hard way. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. On Saturday morning, my doorbell rang at 7 a.m. I opened it to find a young woman in her 20s with Sarah's blonde hair and sharp features. "Mrs. Matthews, I'm Jessica Mills, Sarah's sister. I think we need to talk." Over coffee in my kitchen, Jessica told me a story that made everything click into place. "Sarah's been planning this for 2 years, she said. "Ever since Marcus first mentioned how successful your company was. She's always been jealous of people who have more than she does." "Why are you telling me this?" Jessica looked uncomfortable. "Because she called me yesterday asking for money. She wanted me to wire $10,000 to an account in Switzerland. When I refused, she threatened to ruin my credit rating." That sounded like Sarah. Even on the run, she was trying to manipulate and threaten people. She also said something that worried me. "She's planning to come back to the US, but not to turn herself in. She wants to kill you." The words hit me like ice water. "She said that specifically?" Her exact words were, "That old bitch ruined everything. I'm going to make her pay permanently." I called Detective Morrison immediately. Within an hour, FBI agents were at my house, setting up surveillance equipment and discussing protection protocols. "We're treating this as a credible threat," Agent Susan Torres explained. "Sarah Matthews has already shown she's willing to commit multiple felonies. Threatening violence against a witness is a logical escalation. How long will this take? Depends on how smart she is. If she really tries to come back here, we'll catch her. If she stays in Europe, it could take months or years to extradite her." I spent the weekend in a safe house, a bland apartment that felt like a prison. But Monday morning brought news that changed everything. Marcus had turned himself in. I rushed to the police station, where I found my son sitting in an interview room, looking like he'd aged 10 years. He was alone. Sarah was nowhere to be seen. "Where is she?" Detective Morrison asked. "Gone," Marcus said simply. "She left me in Montreal, took what money we had left and disappeared." "Did she say where she was going?" Marcus shook his head. "She said I was weak and pathetic, that I'd just slow her down." She was probably right. Looking at my son, hollow-eyed, defeated, abandoned by the woman he'd sacrificed everything for, I felt something I hadn't expected. Pity. "Marcus," I said quietly, "tell them everything. About the plan, about Sarah's threats, about what really happened." For the next 4 hours, Marcus confessed to everything. He provided details about Sarah's scheme that even I hadn't known. She'd been researching elder abuse laws for months, looking for ways to have me declared incompetent. She'd been cultivating relationships with my doctor and my accountant, trying to find people who would support her claims about my mental state. Most shocking was her backup plan. If the competency hearing didn't work, she intended to have me committed to a psychiatric facility against my will. She had papers drawn up, Marcus said, his voice breaking. False medical reports. Fake psychiatric evaluations. She was going to have me sign an affidavit saying you'd become violent and delusional. The scope of Sarah's plan was breathtaking in its cruelty. She hadn't just wanted my money, she'd wanted to destroy my life completely. "Why are you telling us this now?" Agent Torres asked. Marcus looked at me through the one-way glass. "Because my mother was right. Sarah didn't love me. She used me to get what she wanted, and when I became inconvenient, she threw me away like garbage." He turned back to the investigators. "I'll testify against her. I'll tell you everything I know about her plans, her contacts, her hiding places. But first I need to ask my mother something." They brought me into the interview room. Marcus looked older, broken, but there was something different in his eyes, a clarity that had been missing for years. "Mom, can you ever forgive me?" I studied my son's face, seeing the little boy who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms and the man who'd betrayed me for a woman who'd never loved him. "That depends," I said. "Are you finally ready to tell me the truth about everything?" Marcus nodded. "Everything, no matter how bad it makes me look." "Then yes," I said. "I can forgive you. But Marcus, this is your last chance. If you ever lie to me again, if you ever choose someone else over family again, we're done forever." "I understand." As I left the police station that afternoon, I realized that in trying to destroy me, Sarah had accidentally given me something precious. My son back. Now we just had to catch her before she could finish what she'd started. Sarah's capture came 3 weeks later, and it wasn't the FBI or Interpol who found her. It was her own greed. She'd been hiding in Geneva, living off money she'd stolen from Matthews and Associates. But $40,000 doesn't last long in Switzerland, especially when you're trying to establish a new identity. So Sarah made a fatal mistake. She tried to access money from accounts she'd hidden from Marcus and me. The FBI had been monitoring all financial activity connected to her social security number, and the moment she logged into a bank account in the Cayman Islands, they had her location. Swiss authorities arrested her at an internet cafe trying to transfer money to a new account she'd opened under a false name. "She'll be extradited within the month," Agent Torres told me. "And thanks to your son's testimony, we have enough evidence to convict her on multiple federal charges." Marcus had kept his word. Over the past 3 weeks, he'd provided investigators with a complete picture of Sarah's criminal enterprise. She'd been embezzling money from Matthews and Associates for over a year, creating false invoices and diverting client payments to accounts only she controlled. She'd also been systematically destroying evidence of my competence, deleting emails that showed my clear thinking and replacing them with confused-sounding messages she'd written herself. "The irony," Detective Morrison said, "is that she spent so much time trying to make you look senile that she created a detailed record of her own criminal planning." The trial was scheduled for September. Marcus would testify for the prosecution in exchange for a reduced sentence, 5 years probation instead of 10 years in prison. It wasn't perfect justice, but it was fair considering his cooperation. "What will you do now?" I asked him as we sat in my office, overlooking the river where I'd built my new life. "I'd like to keep working here, if you'll have me," he said. "I know I don't deserve another chance, but this job, working for you again, It's helped me remember who I used to be before Sarah came along. Marcus had indeed proven himself over the past month. He worked harder than anyone in the office, stayed late without being asked, and never complained about the routine legal work I'd assigned him. More importantly, he'd started standing up for himself in small ways that suggested he was rebuilding his backbone. "You can stay," I said, "but I want you to understand something. I'm not your mother when we're in this office. I'm your boss. You'll earn your position every single day, and you'll never receive special treatment because you're my son. I understand. And Marcus, you'll go to therapy, real therapy, with a professional who specializes in emotional manipulation and psychological abuse. Sarah didn't just steal our money, she stole your ability to think for yourself. If you're going to rebuild your life, you need to understand how that happened." Marcus nodded. "I've already started. Dr. Rebecca Chen. She's helping me understand how Sarah isolated me from everyone who cared about me." That was encouraging. For the first time in years, Marcus was taking responsibility for his own healing instead of waiting for someone else to fix his problems. My phone buzzed with a text from Agent Torres. "Sarah waived extradition. She'll be back in the U.S. tomorrow for arraignment." I showed the message to Marcus. His face went pale. "Are you afraid of her?" I asked. "Terrified," he admitted. "Even in handcuffs, even facing 20 years in prison, she's still the most manipulative person I've ever met. She'll try to blame everything on me, make herself look like a victim." "Let her try," I said. "We have recordings, financial records, and your testimony. The truth has a way of surviving lies." But privately, I shared Marcus's concern. Sarah was indeed manipulative, and she'd had weeks in a Swiss jail cell to plan her defense strategy. The real test would come when she stood in front of a jury and tried to convince them that she was just a loving wife trying to help her confused mother-in-law. I'd built my case carefully, but Sarah had always been good at making people believe her version of events. This time, though, I had something she didn't. The complete truth, documented in her own voice. And sometimes, that's enough. The trial lasted 6 days, and every moment was a masterclass in how truth ultimately defeats deception, no matter how skillfully the lies are told. Sarah's defense attorney painted her as a devoted daughter-in-law who'd been concerned about my mental deterioration. He claimed she'd only tried to help me by taking over business responsibilities I could no longer handle. "My client acted out of love and concern," he told the jury. "Eleanor Matthews has admitted to recording private family conversations without consent. She's admitted to deliberately hiding business assets from her own son. She's admitted to planning an elaborate scheme to punish her family for trying to help her. It was a clever strategy, turn my successful defense into evidence of manipulation and vindictiveness." But then the prosecution played the recordings. 12 jurors listened to Sarah's voice, threatening me with a competency hearing unless I signed papers transferring my company. They heard her discussing plans to have me committed to a psychiatric facility. They heard her calling me "that old bitch" and planning to destroy her completely. Most damaging was a recording from 2 months before the dinner. Sarah and Marcus discussing how much money they'd be able to steal once they controlled my assets. "Once we get guardianship," Sarah's voice was crystal clear, "we can liquidate everything and move somewhere warm. The old bat will be stuck in a nursing home while we live like kings." The jury's faces during that recording told me everything I needed to know. Whatever sympathy they might have felt for a concerned daughter-in-law evaporated when they heard her true feelings about me. Marcus testified on the 4th day. Sarah stared at him with pure hatred as he described her manipulation, her threats, her gradual isolation of him from family and friends. "She convinced me that my mother was becoming paranoid and vindictive," he said. "She made me believe that taking the company was an act of kindness, not theft." Sarah's attorney tried to paint Marcus as a disloyal son, trying to save himself by blaming his wife. But Marcus had documentation, emails, text messages, bank records that corroborated every detail of his testimony. On the 5th day, Sarah took the stand in her own defense. She was magnificent, I had to admit, poised, articulate, seemingly genuine in her concern for my welfare. She explained away each piece of evidence with reasonable-sounding explanations. The recordings? Eleanor was becoming paranoid and suspicious. We had to discuss strategies for helping her without triggering her anxiety. The hidden assets? We discovered she'd been moving money erratically, which confirmed our concerns about her mental state. The threats? Taken out of context by a woman who was already plotting against us. For 2 hours, Sarah spun a web of lies so convincing that I began to worry the jury might believe her. But then the prosecutor began cross-examination. Ms. Matthews, you testified that you were concerned about Eleanor's mental state. Did you ever suggest she see a doctor for evaluation? Yes, we discussed it many times. But you never actually arranged for her to see a specialist, did you? She refused to go. Yet you were planning to have her declared incompetent without a proper medical evaluation? Sarah hesitated. We felt we had enough evidence. Evidence? You mean the recordings you made secretly while manipulating her into appearing confused? That's not... Ms. Matthews, you testified that you were trying to help Mrs. Matthews. Can you explain why your plan included liquidating her assets and moving to another state? Sarah's composure finally cracked. We needed to protect the money from her erratic decisions. By spending it on yourselves? We were her family. We deserved... What did you deserve, Ms. Matthews? The word deserved hung in the air like a confession. In that moment, Sarah revealed her true motivation, not love or concern, but entitlement. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours, guilty on all charges: fraud, elder abuse, embezzlement, filing false police reports, and conspiracy. The judge sentenced Sarah to 15 years in federal prison with no possibility of parole for 7 years. As the bailiff led her away in handcuffs, Sarah turned to look at me one last time. Her mask had finally slipped completely, revealing the cold calculation underneath. "This isn't over," she mouthed silently. I smiled and mouthed back, "Yes, it is." Walking out of the courthouse with Marcus beside me, I felt something I hadn't experienced in 2 years. Complete peace. "What happens now?" Marcus asked. "Now you finish your probation, keep going to therapy, and prove that you've learned from this experience," I said. "And I get back to building the life Sarah tried to steal from me." 6 months later, EM Advisors had grown to 15 employees and had contracts with major corporations across 3 states. Marcus had been promoted to senior legal counsel, a position he'd earned through hard work and dedication. Most importantly, we'd rebuilt our relationship on a foundation of honesty and mutual respect. Sarah's final appeal was denied last month. She'll spend the next 7 years thinking about how greed and manipulation led to her downfall. As for me, I'm 69 years old, running a successful company, and finally free from people who saw me as an obstacle to their ambitions, rather than a person worthy of love and respect. Sometimes the best revenge isn't just justice. It's living so well that your enemy's failure to destroy you becomes the proof of their own weakness. And sometimes, just sometimes, the people who almost destroy you end up giving you exactly what you needed, the chance to discover how strong you really are. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.